We may as well talk about Barcelona and their transfer window. These are the players that, of course, came in and out. But I feel like, Sid, I could ask you the same question that I have for the last 12 months, which would be, Barcelona, what a mess.
Yeah, and remember when Lionel Messi, after he decided to stay, did that interview, and one of the things that he said was that for a very long time now there hasn't been a plan. They've just been juggling things and filling gaps as they go along. As things happen, they respond to them, and there isn't a kind of like a coherent plan. It felt a little bit like that this time around, although I suppose in fairness to Barcelona, the coherent plan was an awareness of the fact that they didn't have any money. And so because they were aware they didn't have any money, they couldn't bring any players in until they moved anyone out. And at least on one level, they were kind of sensible about that. You know, they were in a position where the league wouldn't let them break the salary limits, and so they had to force players out. Now, of course, the problem is that when you're in a position in which everybody knows you're trying to force players out, in which everybody knows you're in financial difficulties, you're not going to get good money for those players. So to give you a rundown, Arturo Vidal, Rafinha, Ivan Rakitic, Todibo, Luis Suarez, all of those went to big European clubs. Barcelona got a grand total of $3.5 million for them. And actually even that figure is false because of course it cost them money for Luis Suarez to go because they had to pay off the final year of his contract.
So given that knowledge, why is Ronald Koeman publicly stating how much he wants Memphis Depay when he knows in theory the finances don't back that?
Yeah, it's curious, isn't it? I mean, I think one of them is look, at the risk of this sounding like a cop-out of an answer, I think one of them is just personality. That's just the way that Koeman is. He's very direct, he's very blunt, and he's actually, to be fair to him, incredibly honest about it. So he said very clearly, look, I want these players, but I know the financial situation isn't good, and so if others don't go first, I won't get them in. I suspect on top of that, there was probably a desire to, excuse me as my earpiece falls out, there was probably a desire to make sure those players knew that he did want them, to try and maybe put some pressure on the board, to try and put some pressure on players who were refusing to go, to try and encourage them to go. So for example, if you've got someone like Ousmane Dembélé, who is the key to being able to bring people in. Why? Because A, you might be able to get a transfer fee for him, or B, as it came towards the end of the window, you think, well, maybe we'll get a loan deal and we'll save around about €9 million a year on his salary. Then I guess as a manager, if you're saying to that player repeatedly and publicly, there is someone else I want, perhaps you feel that you've got a better chance of that player finally backing down and saying, yeah, okay, look, I'll go.
Was that the issue with Dembélé? He didn't want to go?
Well, look, I mean, I think he's one of a number of players that didn't want to go. He didn't want to go. Todibo wasn't that keen at first when there was talk of a reasonably big bid from Fulham, and in the end he went on loan to Benfica. There are other players who didn't want to go. Ricky Puig had been told he wasn't going to play a big part. Carlos Alenya, who'd been told he wasn't going to play a big part, didn't want to go. Now, there's all sorts of reasons why players wouldn't want to. One of them, of course, is a very simple one. This board of directors won't be there for very long.
Right.
There's a very good chance that Ronald Koeman won't be there for very long. Why would they ruin their mid-term future based on a short-term need of the club to generate money? And then there's another kind of almost a moral element to this, which is why would the players feel that they should have the responsibility for facilitating the arrival of other footballers at a time when they've already taken pay cuts because of the COVID crisis, and at a time when they're thinking, well, actually, if I hang on, who knows, once that window's closed, perhaps I will end up playing.
Obviously, from a US perspective, a lot of interest in Sergiño Dest. He would come on in the second half of that game at the weekend. Overall assessment of his performance?
I mean, to be honest with you, I almost can't give you an answer to that question because, of course, he came on at left back instead of right back. He didn't have a huge amount of time on the pitch. I think there's a certain degree of excitement with him because he's young, because he's quick, because he spoke very well incidentally about Dani Alves and how closely he'd watched him and how he wanted to be that kind of player, because everybody knows that Ronald Koeman has a huge amount of faith in him. And actually, although it's still early, most people in Barcelona have quite a lot of faith in Koeman as well. Of course, he was the one signing that was able to happen because Semedo left. So I think there's goodwill towards him. I think there's a sense that he could be a good player. But of course, as happens with everything at Barcelona right now, there is also a kind of a sense of, okay, look, let's hang on and let's see what happens. And as I say, at the weekend, out of position, on the pitch for only, what was it, I think 15 or 20 minutes, then I think it's too early to make any real kind of judgment on him.
One player we certainly can make a judgment on, and certainly his coach has, is Antoine Griezmann, who seems to be right back to square one. What I thought was interesting or unnecessary, depending on how you want to describe it, was Koeman coming out and saying, yeah, he should have taken one of those chances. What good does that do in life?
That's a very good question. I mean, look, I take you back almost as if it was a courtroom. I refer you to my previous answer, in which I said that this is partly personality with Koeman.
Yeah, but surely,
he's
I understand
direct.
it's his personality, but you're a coach, you're a man manager. This is your job, isn't it?
Yes.
Going out in the media and saying that a player who surely knew that, you know he's got to take those chances, saying that publicly doesn't help him
Absolutely.
one bit.
No, absolutely, and that was precisely how I felt as well. And obviously, I think a lot of people would say, well, it's about time these players were told.
Yeah.
It's about time these players who've lived far too comfortably, had far too much of an easy life for too long, had a manager who was actually a leader who imposed upon them. Now, on one level, by the way, I can buy that argument. I really can. On one level, I can say, yeah, you know what? Maybe it is time you had someone said, look, I'm in charge here. I say what I think, and tough luck. That said, there's a big difference between us kind of intuitively thinking that maybe there was time for this and how a professional player responds to it. Some players respond very well. Some players certainly don't. And the other thing is that you have to be seen as a manager. And I'm sure all the boys in the studio will tell you this time and time again. I'm sure Stevie Nicol will tell you this time and time again. You have to be seen to be being fair, to being equally, the way you treat people has to be equal. Okay, so how easy do you think it would be for Ronald Koeman to say that to Leo Messi?
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.